When I was sharing an apartment, I discovered the secret of poor soundproofing. Every night, I could hear my neighbors' love quarrels and wild parties. At first, it didn't bother me much until one day when I found out that the girl next door secretly brought a stranger to spend the night while her boyfriend was away. I thought it was just their lover's quarrel, but little did I know that my life would be completely disrupted by this incident. Not only did I lose my job, but also turned against my former friends. Earlier this year, I made the same mistake as my buddy moved to New York with him after graduation to share an apartment together. We were college classmates who had been studying medicine for 6 years and knew each other well enough to wear split pants together. Initially, we planned on finding a one-bedroom apartment where two guys could live together happily, like old times while splitting rent costs. However, things changed when he suddenly got himself a girlfriend named Marcy before our departure date. Marcy was pretty with big eyes, but slightly shorter than us despite being 2 years older, as she pursued postgraduate studies at our university. It's fine if he wants to have a girlfriend. Jealousy is all there is for me anyway. But then again, he refused long distance relationships and decided to bring his girlfriend along with him instead of leaving her behind. As expected from good buddies like us who always help each other out in need, we ended up renting 2 rooms instead of one so they can stay together comfortably under one roof. However, something felt off once we moved into our shared apartment, which consisted of 2 bedrooms separated by only one wall during summer nights when air conditioning became necessary. That night, I first heard a drick sound followed by the buzzing of the air conditioning unit outside. I immediately sensed that something was wrong and quickly realized it was a problem with the wall. Then I began to overhear the private conversations between this young couple, Marcy and Kevin. First came Marcy's soft voice saying, "It's so hot," followed by Kevin's lazy responsive, "Me too." After a few seconds of silence, then there was another period of silence before Marcy said, "I want to drink milk tea." Kevin replied, "It's not good to drink sweet things late at night." Marcy seemed unhappy and started whining in a cutesy voice. "But I want it." However, Kevin stood his ground as an exemplary gentleman and refused the request. After that, it went on for half an hour with Marcy insisting she wanted it while Kevin kept refusing her. But even heroes can't resist their beloved's pleas. Eventually, Kevin gave in to Marcy's demands. About half an hour later, I heard the sound of someone opening the door along with rustling plastic bags. Then there was a low voice saying, "Brother, don't forget to give me 5 stars." Ha! It made me laugh, honestly speaking. This is my first time experiencing such things. It's quite refreshing listening to people chatting about trivial matters like this, especially when they are familiar acquaintances, but hearing gossip through walls makes it all more interesting. Of course, where there are mundane daily routines like these, there will also be, passionate moments filled with excitement. What do you hope to hear when encountering such situations? Well, those who know what's up know what they'd like to hear. Perhaps due to unfamiliarity with their new home or out of respect for others during their initial days living here, Kevin and Marcy were quite reserved. But after just 2 or 3 days, they couldn't hold back any longer. That night, I had barely put my head on the pillow when I heard a coquettish voice from next door. It was faint, but it sounded like Marcy's, though very seductive. Then there was a gasp followed by continuous crescendos. And then my buddies started panting too, while the rhythmic creaking of their bed gradually increased in speed. If you're going to do that, don't expect me to fall asleep. As an experienced solo sleeper, this is the first time I've ever heard such sounds up close and personal. My interest was piqued immediately. Unfortunately, just as I wanted, to savor every moment of it. The sound suddenly stopped, and all that remained was the sound of running water from their shower. When I looked at my watch, I almost laughed out loud. 45 seconds. This experience will be unforgettable for me for the rest of my life. Kevin is always bragging about how many times he does it in a night. But he's just all talk and no action. Speaking of which, I have to mention that it's not like I have some kind of voyeuristic fetish. I'm only bringing up these two things to illustrate how much more interesting my life has become since this wall went up. Think about it. Whenever there's nothing else going on, I can visit the VIP section and watch a little romantic movie or listen to a couple bickering back and forth. Sometimes they even perform free comedy routines. You don't get that kind of treatment in regular rental apartment. Of course, there are limits to what I'll put up with. At first, I thought about telling my brothers about the soundproofing issue. But then again, it was such an awkward situation that I didn't want to bring it up. Even if we did say something, what could we do? The soundproofing problem couldn't be fixed easily and might make both sides feel uncomfortable. So overall, I decided to keep the soundproof wall as my own little secret, something fun for me when there's nothing else going on. Of course, you know what they say, every good thing comes with its downsides too. At the beginning of May this year, when COVID-19 had finally calmed down, I planned a rare vacation trip for myself. Unfortunately, though, when Kevin and his girlfriend Marcy declined my invitation due to work commitments, Kevin was doing an internship at the hospital, my plans fell through. Since Marcy wasn't coming either way, she wanted to stay home, playing games like any other couch potato during her days off. There was no point in me going alone either. So instead of enjoying some time off from work like everyone else during Labor Day weekend, which also happened to coincide with our company's day off, I decided to go somewhere relatively close by. I thought it would be a nice change of pace and give me some much needed relaxation. But as soon as I arrived in Tianjin on the first day, I regretted my decision. There were so many people. I couldn't even visit any tourist attractions without bumping into someone's backside. And since I was all alone while everyone else seemed to be coupled up, it just made me feel more lonely and bored than ever before. So on the second day of my vacation, after giving it some thought, I decided to head back home for some peace and quiet instead. After all that traveling around, even though it wasn't very far, the first thing on my mind when arriving home was taking a nap. Unexpectedly, just as I had barely rested my head on the pillow, something happened. From the other side of the soundproof wall, I suddenly heard a clear sound of a door lock being turned, followed by footsteps entering the room. There were clearly two sets of footsteps. One was crisp and clicking like high heels, while the other was duller and sounded like sneakers. This meant that there were a man and woman who had entered. At first, I thought it was just my brother and Marcy returning, so I didn't think much about it and prepared to go back to sleep. However, when the man spoke his first words, I immediately sat up in shock. The voice wasn't right. I've listened to Kevin's raspy voice for years, but this stranger's voice was obviously not his. The man sounded tired with some panting in his breaths. I faintly heard him complain. "Your place is so high up. Why don't you install an elevator?" Then came Marcy's coquettish whine. "All right already. Do you think everywhere is your villa? This is just a shared apartment." What followed next was even more explosive. Marcy seductively said, "No one's here now. Hurry up," which made the man's voice become lecherous. He excitedly muttered, "This is my first time playing in such a place. It's quite thrilling." Then came sounds from next door, clothes rustling against each other, gasping sounds, moans, thumping noises, and even cries of "Daddy." My scalp felt like it exploded at that moment. I never dreamed that something like this would happen unexpectedly. And yet here I am witnessing my own brother getting cheated on firsthand. At that moment, I guessed what probably happened. Marcy must have been cheating all along, but since both me and my brother were always home, she never brought anyone over. However, with Kevin working overtime and me traveling during the May Day holiday, she took advantage of the opportunity to play around. But what she didn't calculate was that I would come back early, and even worse, we had a non-soundproof wall between us. My mind went numb at this realization. It made me feel like I knew nothing about people's true nature. I never thought that Marcy, who always acted so innocent in front of me, could be such a woman behind my back, especially when I heard the sounds from next door getting more intense through the live broadcast. My emotions became even more complicated. Soon enough, another question came to mind. Should I tell my brother about Marcy's infidelity? Should I just stand by and watch as my kind-hearted elder brother gets played by some seductive slut? Should he wear a cuckold hat while helping someone else pick up their pieces, out of brotherly love? There shouldn't even be any hesitation in answering this question. But then again, there is an old saying, it's hard for an honest official to judge family affairs. I'm not belittling myself, but rather stating that I have always been very sensible and clear-headed about where I stand.
No matter how close I am with my brothers.
At the end of the day, I'm still an outsider. Besides, there's Marcy in between them, and she's Kevin's main squeeze. Even if she cheats on him multiple times, it's still their private affair as a couple. As an outsider, it would be inappropriate for me to interfere recklessly. Speaking of which, I was struggling with what to do when suddenly the loud noises from next door brought me back to reality. The sounds of ah were already echoing throughout the room. But that wasn't important. What mattered was that at this moment, I suddenly heard a conversation between those two people who were getting frisky. How is it, baby? "Hmm, compared to your boyfriend. Ah, quickly tell me. Ah, okay. You're amazing. You're so much better than that useless guy. What the hell? Not only are you two fooling around, but you also have to belittle someone else. And doing all this in Kevin's house? Insulting Kevin right in front of me. Disgusting. I can scold my good friend Kevin all I want, but who gave these two dogs the face to yap away like that?" Suddenly, everything became clear and I made up my mind. I had to make sure Kevin knew Marcy's true colors. I never expected things would turn out this way. After vacation ended, and while Marcy was away one day, I immediately sat down with Kevin for a heart-to-heart talk. My plan was well thought out. All those worries about being tactful before were unnecessary. Being cheated on is something no man can tolerate. Once I reveal Marcy's true nature and convince Kevin to kick her out completely, why should we worry about any position issues? Of course, there was no way for me to directly say, "You've been cheated." That would be too hurtful and raise the crucial question of how I found out. The secret about the thin walls couldn't be revealed, or else once Marcy was done with Kevin, I'd have no face left to show. So during my remaining vacation time, I came up with a reasonable excuse for meeting up with my friend, drinking. Alcohol is always the best prop for setting the mood. No matter what I said next, it could all just be attributed to drunken talk. After a few bottles of alcohol, when Kevin was slightly tipsy, I slowly broached the topic. Pretending to sigh and complain about how women can never be trusted these days and how men are always devoted to their partners forever. Who cares about women? Whoever treats them better, they'll follow. No mercy at all. As soon as I said this, Kevin burst out laughing. He took a swig of his beer and asked me what was up with me today. He teased me for suddenly having such emotions as a single dog. Seeing that he took the bait, I deliberately took another sip of my drink and sighed before telling him a friend's story. Well, brothers are also friends, especially best friends. It's not really lying. I told Kevin that during our university days, I knew a friend who had a good relationship with his girlfriend. They were just like you and your girlfriend. They rented an apartment together in another city. Kevin became curious and asked what happened next. So I continued to say that my friend was similar to you at first. He got along very well with his girlfriend every day with little passion and sweetness. But one day something unexpected happened. On his girlfriend's birthday, he wanted to surprise her by pretending to work overtime, but secretly prepared a gift for her instead. He then took leave early so he could go home and give her the surprise gift. Guess what happened? As soon as he opened the door, there were surprises all over the bed. Don't be fooled by how ordinary she usually looks. In fact, she is quite promiscuous. Not only did she cheat on him outside, but when my friend worked overtime seeking excitement elsewhere, she brought her lover back home. She just didn't expect my friend would come back early and catch them red-handed. As Kevin listened to the story, his face changed suddenly. I saw that it was time to strike while the iron was hot, so I paused for a few seconds before pretending to speak carelessly due to being drunk while comforting Kevin. Oh dear me. I've said too much. Don't worry though, because even though you're similar to my friend, your girlfriend is different, right? Your girlfriend won't do anything to hurt you. I emphasized the last sentence.
I know Kevin too well.
He belongs to the extremely introverted type. The more this kind of person thinks about something, the more they worry. If I directly warned him, he would not pay much attention. But if I comforted him instead, he would definitely think even more. As expected, Kevin's face became even uglier, and he didn't say much after that but drank a lot more alcohol than before. At that moment, my mood was complicated for a moment, and I felt sorry for him but didn't show it. After all, although the story was made up, it was based on true events. He just happened to be the male protagonist in this case, so everything had to be said. I quickly used comforting words to tell him not to worry too much because Marcy is young and beautiful, so even if she doesn't cheat on you, there may still be others who are interested in her. This is the art of speaking. Saying things indirectly can make people believe them even more easily. Sometimes. But after arousing his suspicion appropriately, then comforting him afterwards. Oftentimes, these seemingly well-intentioned admonitions will become the final straw that crushes his psychological defenses. Kevin finally calmed down completely and reluctantly smiled at me. He told me that he was feeling tired and had work tomorrow morning, so we should both go back home now since we've been drinking quite a bit tonight. Although I said this, casually everyone knows that there's no way he could sleep soundly tonight. I believe everything I wanted to tell him has already been conveyed clearly enough by now. However, what surprised me was how fast Kevin acted despite usually being such an indecisive person. On our way back home that night, while getting ready for bed next door suddenly became noisy. It started with Marcy's angry shout. "You actually looked at my phone." Then came Kevin's counterattack. "You still have the nerve to argue. If I didn't take a look, I wouldn't even know you're such a disgusting person." Then came an extremely dramatic quarrel. Due to my deep memory, I can basically repeat it verbatim. "I'm disgusting." "How am I disgusting? I just acted impulsively, but you invaded my privacy." It's a matter of character. Don't shift the blame and make trouble. If you do this kind of thing, why don't you delete the records? Fooling around outside is one thing, but bringing it home too. Disgusting. Have I done anything wrong to you? Ha! Why are you treating me like this? Have you treated me well? If you were nicer to me, would I go find someone else? Last Valentine's Day, didn't you promise to take me to Disneyland? But what happened later? That time my supervisor suddenly had a task for me. What could I do about it? Didn't I apologize afterwards? Besides, is that your reason for cheating on me? Kevin suddenly slammed the table several times with a loud noise that was hard to hear. Have I not done so much for you? Can you justify yourself? This counts as doing something for me. What about last time then? You forgot my birthday. For your sake, I fought with my family and followed you here in New York. But what about you? Did you ever care about me? If you don't love me, can I find someone who does? Can forgetting one birthday lead to infidelity? We're talking about your problem now. The essence of their argument was probably centered around who has sacrificed more and who has wronged whom, which became a repetitive cycle. As an onlooker, I could see clearly what was happening and felt sorry for my brother. Why bother with such a woman? The conversation then shifted to making trouble, and eventually Marcy lightly brushed over her own mistakes, blaming Kevin entirely for the infidelity. What an idiot. But as I mentioned before, Kevin is introverted and probably not good at expressing himself verbally. It made me so anxious that I wished I could join the battlefield directly and throw this scum girl out of the house for my brother. Gradually, however, I realized something was wrong. The direction of their conversation seemed to be turning in a strange way. The turning point came when Marcy suddenly burst into tears while they were arguing. At that moment, there was silence between them. After a long pause, Kevin stuttered out, "What's wrong with crying?" Then came the sound of tissue paper being used to wipe away tears and sniffles. A little later on, still sniffling slightly from crying earlier, Marcy replied in nasal tones, "You bullied me, why can't I cry?" Kevin sounded angry as he rubbed his head. "Who bullied you? Tell me if it's your fault or not." Unexpectedly at this point, Marcy actually said,
Yes.
then followed by an unexpected twist which caught me off guard. Male phobia. Because they suddenly stopped quarreling, their voices became very low, so all I could hear vaguely was Marcy telling Kevin about her past experiences growing up in an abusive household, where she suffered verbal abuse from her father after her mother left them both behind due to domestic violence issues. This led to Marcy developing male phobia since childhood. As they suddenly stopped arguing, their voices became very low, and I could only vaguely hear that Marcy seemed to be telling Kevin about her past. The gist of it was that Marcy grew up in a household where her father was abusive and her mother couldn't take it anymore, so she left them. Marcy was forced to live with her abusive father and suffered from verbal abuse and physical violence. This caused some problems with Marcy's mental state as she developed a fear of men from an early age, However, like any girl, she still wanted to fall in love during adolescence and found herself a boyfriend whom she had sex with for the first time. Unexpectedly, this experience led to another change in her mentality. Afterwards, Marcy discovered that her boyfriend treated her especially gently, which made her feel safe again after such a long time. She uncontrollably linked sex with safety together and became dependent on sex. At this point, Marcy cried again. She told Kevin that deep down inside she loved him, but even when they were dating before, she still thought about finding other men due to this twisted habit of hers. Even though there wasn't anything physical involved most times, just psychological satisfaction. At this point, there was silence for quite some time, except for the sound of crying from Marcy. Well, how should I put it? What? A liar? Even as an outsider listening in on their conversation, I got angry. Sister, you can make up lies, but at least think logically. What kind of nonsense is this supposed past? It makes sense if someone who has been abused would be afraid of men, but what kind of logic is linking safety directly with having sex? And why can't Kevin provide you with security since he's also male? Can't you just keep changing partners if one doesn't work out? The logic behind all this is really messed up. Honestly speaking, I don't understand it at all. But that's not the point. The point is, Kevin believed her after the silence. I actually heard Kevin crying too. He muttered a few words about how he never thought she had such a hard time, and this was the reason why. Then there was a creaking sound from the bed as Marcy's crying became muffled, probably because Kevin sat down on the bed end. And then my good buddy, my friend who I worked so hard to help out, actually said in a calm voice, "It's okay now. From now on, you have me. I won't blame you anymore. Let me love you." He actually forgave Marcy. At that moment, my brain shut down. My mentality collapsed completely. Is this what they mean by beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Is this what happens when people fall in love? If someone can be fooled by such a story, then it's not just being foolish. They're downright stupid. Subconsciously, I almost rushed into their room and punched Marcy twice, but immediately realized one big problem. Awkwardness. Originally, my plan was to be an anonymous hero who would get rid of Marcy for Kevin. As long as this scumbag left him alone, then everything would be fine and dandy for me. No harm done. But now that Marcy couldn't leave, things were suddenly complicated. We've been within close proximity before, so if she finds out how Kevin found out about her infidelity, will she start suspecting me? Kevin has lost all his brain cells right now, so he'll say anything. This bad woman isn't like Kevin, who has no brains. Even if it's just drunken talk, she'll definitely figure some things out. If she starts whispering evil thoughts into Kevin's ear again, damn, I'll immediately become someone who meddles too much, who advises separation instead of reconciliation, a person who's neither here nor there, unfortunately because of the soundproof wall. I can't be direct and have to take whatever comes my way. At that moment, all I could do was pray that Marcy was just a jerk with a stupid brain. Obviously, I had overthought things. Could a woman who easily turned against Kevin in just a few words be brainless? Just as I was still struggling with my thoughts, I heard the words that I dreaded most from next door. "Hey, by the way, why did you suddenly look at my phone today?" asked Marcy. "Oh, nothing much," replied Kevin. "Lewis and I had some drinks, and he told me a story about his friend." From then on, my nightmare began. Since that night, it became obvious to me that both Kevin and Marcy were looking at me differently. Their attitudes towards me became noticeably colder and more distant than before. While we could still maintain an outwardly harmonious relationship with each other despite Marcy's behavior, it was clear that Kevin had been influenced by her actions. Previously, we would go out for dinner every 2 or 3 days. Now, even if I initiated plans, he would find excuses to decline them. He would also sneer at me for no reason, saying things like, "Sorry, but my appetite hasn't been good lately, so I can't drink." Even when invited to play games together like we used to do regularly before, where previously all he needed to say was, "Let's log in," now he would coldly refuse. What made matters worse is how often he deliberately played online games with others right in front of me as if trying to provoke me. It really got on my nerves. What kind of brotherhood is this? After all the effort and time spent helping him out, only for him to treat me like this. But what made me angrier than anything else is how much of a scumbag Marcy turned out to be. The fact proved that she wasn't someone worth trusting after all. After our encounter, she quickly associated it with me and launched a revenge campaign against me. Kevin's change in behavior was all due to her instigation. The soundproof wall was my last secret, and they didn't know about it. So I often heard Marcy whispering into Kevin's ear at night, distorting my intentions over and over again. Especially that night, the memory still fresh in my mind when I heard Marcy's sinister voice once more. She pulled Kevin aside to talk about something before bed, but what came out of her mouth wasn't anything coherent. "Hey," said Marcy, "I can't figure out how Lewis found out." Kevin seemed tired as he mumbled, "Just happened to see it. Otherwise, what else could we do?" Then there was silence for a moment before Marcy spoke up again. "Anyway, you should stay away from Lewis from now on. I don't think he is a good person." According to her logic, even if you knew such things as good friends, you should keep them confidential, right? So why did I tell Kevin? Why did she speak so ambiguously? It was obvious that I couldn't stand seeing Kevin happy. The most jealous people are always those cool things. Seeing that Kevin had a girlfriend while I remained single made me feel unbalanced inside, hence why I wanted to ruin their relationship. In the end, even Kevin agreed, with her statement saying he would be more careful in the future. I was so angry when I overheard their conversation. This woman is a master at distorting the truth. She can always make the same thing sound like two different things. Am I jealous? Do I not want you to be happy? No, I just don't want you. You bastard. The farther away from me, the better. And Kevin, too. He loses his mind whenever he sees a woman. Why do you believe everything she says? How long have we known each other compared to Marcy? If I really didn't care about your well-being, why would I bother telling you about the soundproof wall and risk getting into trouble? But now it's too late. The focus is no longer on, how did I know? But rather, why did I tell my brother? Marcy has completely twisted my intentions, and anything that comes out of my mouth will only backfire. Even if I reveal the secret of the soundproof wall. Now, what good will it do? Kevin might even think, you were eavesdropping. I couldn't figure out how to get out of this situation. Every day was filled with humiliation and behind-the-scenes scheming while pretending nothing happened. To make matters worse, Marcy intensified her attacks both verbally and offline. The real conflict erupted one day when I came home and saw Marcy crying in the living room with Kevin comforting her. I had no idea what happened, but because our relationship was already strained at that time, seeing those two made me annoyed, so without asking any questions, I went back to my room to rest. Then suddenly Kevin came up to me yelling, "How could you do something like this? What did we ever do to deserve this disgusting behavior from you?" Confused by his sudden attack on me before even explaining what he meant by this, he stormed off towards the dining table where he picked up a lipstick with teeth marks on it and came back towards me. My mind went blank when I saw the lipstick. Kevin accused me of biting Marcy's lipstick, claiming that they both left for work in the morning and found their room door open and the lipstick like this when they returned home. Since there were only 3 people in the house at that time, Marcy couldn't have done it to herself. Kevin wouldn't do such a thing either. Naturally, I became the only suspect. I was so angry. How could Kevin not see through this obvious setup by Marcy? Why would I even bite her disgusting lipstick? But my logical arguments were useless. Kevin insisted that I was the one who did it. He even came up with a set of explanations for these unreasonable things. He said that I had planned it all along, secretly got the key to their room, and left after chewing on Marcy's lipstick when they were not at home today. Then he waited until they all came back home and pretended to have just returned from work. And as for the reason, Kevin actually thought that I had inappropriate thoughts about Marcy. But because we are brothers, I could only secretly bite Marcy's personal belongings to satisfy myself. It made me so angry that my heart hurt. You really are amazing at making associations. Why don't you write novels if you're so good at reasoning? But soon enough, I understood that Kevin's brain couldn't come up with these explanations. The real culprit must be Marcy, who had planned everything from the beginning. Unfortunately, although I knew this in my heart, I didn't have time to argue with Kevin. Just as we were arguing, Marcy came over and poured oil. On fire again? She pretended to be weak and cried while asking me why I would do such a thing to her. She was really scared. She also said that if she did something wrong, which caused me to misunderstand her intentions towards me, then she apologizes, but hopes that in future I won't do such things again since our relationship is important. Oh boy, every sentence seemed blameless, but there was an underlying threat behind each one of them. Her words directly confirmed me as a pervert while portraying herself as an innocent victim like a white lotus flower blooming out of mud. But it wasn't over yet. At this point, Marcy asked, how did I get into their room? Immediately, Kevin acted like he was being controlled by remote control and said yes. There must be keys belonging to their room on me, and then he started to stay in the room. And then he started to search my body by force. Being caught in the middle of these two people, plus all the grievances I had suffered before, my emotions finally burst. At that moment, I didn't care about anything anymore and cursed Kevin for being an idiot. Damn it, I didn't do this thing. It was all Marcy's doing. Please be clear-headed and don't let this woman deceive you. And then Kevin lost his temper. His eyes turned red on the spot as he shouted at me, not only for doing such dirty things, but also daring to falsely accuse his girlfriend. He even threw a punch at me. I had been holding back for a long time, but then I didn't hold back anymore and picked up a stool to smash it on him. The fight was quite intense, with tables, chairs, bowls, and pots all over the place. We stopped when we were both exhausted and went back to our rooms without saying anything. After this incident, I felt really disappointed. Before that, I had been trying to help Kevin see Marcy's true colors. But I never expected that he would be so easily influenced by her words. At one point, I even thought about giving up and moving out. Why bother putting myself through this? But after struggling with the idea for a night, I gave up on it. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't because of some sense of brotherhood or loyalty like Kevin has. It's just that I refuse to give in. Because now I understand what Marcy is really after. She brainwashed Kevin before and could still use revenge as an excuse for leaking my secrets earlier. But what was the point of staging this whole scene today? It suddenly dawned on me why she hadn't moved out yet. She cares about money too much, and Kevin hasn't completely fallen under her spell yet. There are still feelings between us. So the best way forward is to force me out voluntarily. And can you blame me for not wanting to do what my enemy wants? I may not have many things going for me right now, but at least I have integrity. When people get angry, they tend to lose their cool, but surprisingly enough, at that moment of anger, I came up with an ingenious plan. The next day, I pretended to still be sulking and announced something important to Kevin. I've been feeling really frustrated lately and I wanted to get some fresh air. So, I decided to go on a month-long trip, which conveniently means you won't be around to see it. Kevin was still upset about our last argument and didn't say much except that we could talk about it when I got back. He still believed in Marcy despite everything, but I wasn't angry anymore, just coldly amused. Because soon enough I would reveal Marcy's true colors, so pretending to pack my bags and taking time off from work at the hospital, I went out and bought a month's worth of food and supplies from the supermarket. Then, while they were sleeping at night, I snuck back into the room and locked the door behind me. Yes, my plan was to stay in that room for an entire month. My bet was that Marcy couldn't resist cheating again if given the opportunity. And so my trip became her chance for another affair. It was an incredibly long month. Even thinking about it now makes me feel weak in the knees. Since I couldn't leave the room, all my food had to be snacks for instant meals. And water had to be rationed too. As for using the bathroom, well, let's just say there wasn't anywhere else for me to go but inside that small space with them. Before long, there were strange smells everywhere making me dizzy. During week 1, all I heard through those walls were Kevin and Marcy talking as usual. In week 2, something unexpected happened. The smell of my waste drew Marcy's attention towards our door. Even though I prepared deodorant spray beforehand, it proved difficult covering up such a strong odor completely. She tried opening our door, but found it only half unlocked. At this point, my heart stopped beating momentarily as every breath became shallow. Luckily, she didn't find anything suspicious. Kevin unexpectedly helped me out by saying, "Everyone's gone. How could it be the smell here? It must be a problem with the pipes. I'll go ask management." Marcy, seemed to have been convinced, and after turning the lock twice, she didn't try again. By week 3, food was running low and water was scarce too. This being my first time doing something like this, I hadn't prepared enough supplies. I had to make do with what little I had left and ration everything carefully just to get through each day. Fortunately for me, good things come to those who wait. I remember feeling quite dazed at that point. It must have been around the third weekend of my stay when I finally heard some strange noises coming from next door. Marcy talking on the phone in a relaxed tone. She asked flirtatiously if he would come over today since Kevin wasn't home. Then giggled before adding, "You're so bad. Hurry up then. I'll take a shower while waiting for you." And then there were those sounds again. But this time her voice wasn't accompanied by that stranger's from last time. At that moment, every inch of my body felt relieved, finally, so I took out my phone and started recording everything very carefully, not missing even one sound. After they finished their business, I immediately sent Kevin both the audio file as well as a photo of myself, along with an explanation about how thin our walls really were. "You said you could forgive me, right? And that you thought it was me who caused all your problems. Well, now let me show you exactly who can't change their ways. Let's see what kind of person Marcy really is. For any man, forgiving someone once might be possible, but 2 times in a row is simply too much." In fact, later that afternoon, we were woken up by Kevin and Marcy arguing loudly. "I would never have thought you were this kind of person. Why did you do this to me? Why? Haven't I given you enough? Didn't you promise not to do it again? Don't touch me. You make me sick. I've never felt so disgusted in my life." At that moment, surprisingly, I felt calm and just let out a sigh of relief. Finally, I wouldn't have to listen to Marcy and Kevin's conversations anymore. Finally, I could get some good sleep. As for what happened later, there's not much to say. Marcy was kicked out overnight and Kevin knocked on my door frantically, apologizing to me. But I didn't want to accept it. After a few days of reflection, I blocked him directly and moved out of the apartment at night. He may have been raised without being disciplined, but that's no excuse for his behavior towards me. Brainwashed or deceived, whatever the reason may be, his actions have left me heartbroken. I can no longer trust him like before. Today he could abandon our 6-year friendship for a woman, and tomorrow he could betray me over something else. An apology cannot solve everything in this world. What has happened and what has been hurt cannot be compensated anymore. I did this as an explanation to our many years of friendship and, more importantly, as justice for myself. It is regrettable, but I don't regret it. In fact, I'm quite glad about it because at least this incident taught me 2 things. Firstly, even if your relationship is strong with someone else, don't meddle in their affairs blindly. Secondly, never share an apartment with your best friend, ever. Well, the story has come to an end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We have more videos available. Please visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel.